You're not supposed to be sucking off that energy that's not yours. You're not supposed to be sucking off that energy that is not yours. You're not supposed to be sucking off that energy that is not yours. You're not supposed to be sucking off that energy that is not yours. You're not supposed to be sucking off that energy. You're not supposed to be sucking off that energy. I repeat, you're not supposed to be sucking that energy that is not yours. To be sucking off that energy that is not yours.
Oops. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hi, everyone. That's Seth Daniels. Parasite, that's called. You can listen to it on Spreaker.com. Welcome to the Porthole to Justice. This is Amelia Duran, your host. The window to the truth. It is July 5th. And I'm going to have Lotus on. She's got some updates for us. You know, we're not just like some prayer group over here. We're actually Lotus is a one-woman army all to herself. Oh, okay.
Hello.
Hello, darling. Welcome to the Porthole to Justice.
How are you today, this fine day after our 242nd anniversary?
Yeah.
Of our republic, I guess. Of our formalized republic.
Happy Freedom from Satanism Day, right?
Right. Statism Day, is that what you said? Ha ha, comedy, Satanism thing.
I think I'm funny.
It is funny because they are really Satanists. They believe in, I don't know what I think they believe in absolution from all things, including evil acts against children by their God. And that's not my God. Mm-hmm. My God said, no. So, and one is a heartless state.
So interesting topic, though, the other day that you and I were talking on the phone, and which I absolutely love our conversations, by the way.
Right.
You were telling me about this.
Remember, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
You remember me telling me about this person? Go ahead.
Oh, do you remember telling me the other day about this different perspective on Jesus and him being the Antichrist? I thought that was a really interesting sort of...
That's my perspective on how they might be able to see him that way from their kind of warped eschatology. Uh-huh. If I'm using that word properly. In that, to them, Lucifer, to Satanism, Lucifer opened the gates of hell, in that perspective. And there is the Gnosticism and the Gnostic belief, which I think is really translated, in my opinion, to the whole totality of the word, which involves Jesus scriptures, and there's also gospels from unknown authors. The Thunder Perfect Mind is a Gnostic text that is an incredible piece of feminine spirituality. It's about creation, and even if you're a man and you read it, it empowers you to your creative divinity, because men create too. They just create things differently than women do. Women create things more viscerally. Men match that physicality, externally. But so there are things that even in reading these Gnostic texts, a lot of them are poetry, such as the Secret Gospel of John. Jesus' brother is poetry. So when you look at the greater knowledge of the stories behind Jesus as a prophet and as the spiritist, enlightened individual who transcends death outside his body and takes this journey. This is how I foresee the way the Bible tells me of Jesus's life, is he transcends death and goes into a spiritist journey where he actually travels in what is described in the Secret Gospel of John, into hell, and where he meets his spirit wife, Sophia, who birthed she birthed chaos in her unhappiness towards men in the way they treat women. Okay, and that he went into the netherworld, the dark world, and that the light that he came back with in his resurrection was with the light that when he found her and he shone upon her, a woman running around in darkness, not fearful of the dark, but mad and birthing chaos in the name of the ire of all men. When that light shone upon her, the reflection of that feeling that she had all, it gave him enlightenment to what his purpose was. Here he went into hell thinking he's going to save all these souls, and he finds this one woman who's the mother of chaos. She's a deity herself. Sophia is a spirit deity, and she is part of the God, Mother, Father that Jesus spoke of in the Secret Gospels. See, the Roman cult removed the female figure, so I have a greater totality and understanding of all the greater stories of not just Jesus, but also of some of his other apostles, because I read Gnosticism, and I apply them to Buddhism. I do what like Joseph Campbell did in his social study of iconographic
Who was a mythological figure that could travel into the underworld and into the higher realms?
Right, that's what I'm saying. There's tons of these types of deities. Now, some deities can do it all. Like in Hinduism, it's really easy. Certain deities have limited ability because they believe in different transcendence. There's the pure spirit heaven, then there's the spirit flesh, physical, and then there's just the flesh. So there's three levels really to ascendancy in their belief system, basically. But some deities can't go through all three of them. Like that's the higher deities, especially the middle deity. So they have more mythology. Our mythology is very complicated, and because we come through a great many cultures as Christians and as all these other cultural faiths. But the beautiful thing is when you study our culture that America has become, and you look at all of the spiritual prophets, we really satisfy all of them. It's like the people have come together. And that's what I'm saying, referring to Joseph, like Joseph Campbell wrote this book about heroes. I think the title of it's Heroes. And he studied all these, what we would consider not enlightened cultures, tribal cultures all over the world. And he listened to their folklore stories. Mm-hmm. And he found that all these cultures had very similar people, like icons, that had an iconographic kind of mentality. One would be the hero, the man who stands up, and they would have a figure in their folklore where they told stories about this hero. And so they would perpetuate these types of cultural iconographic figures so the people would aspire to these things, and that it was a way that even in the most rudimentary cultures, we create stories of people that we are to aspire to. And so in the Buddhists, and I just told a friend this the other day, so in the Buddhist and the Hindu sense, they would say, I am embodying Buddha. I am embodying Shiva. and I'm going to be the spirit of Shiva. We don't think I'm going to be the spirit of Christ within us. You know, we really don't perceive it.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of like Persone. I can't say her name, but yeah, it is Sophia. And
yeah, Sophia is in all of us. Sophia has all these counters. She's Ishtar. She's, there's all these parallels for all these female deities. And if you study the Egyptian
Persephone.
Yeah, Persephone.
Yeah, that's how you say it. That's right. Okay, I wanted to pronounce it right.
Yes, it's Persephone. I think my mom had a cat named Persephone. That maybe it seems like she should have had one. Mm-hmm. But yeah. But if you study, so when I read all these spiritual writings, I mean, some of them are truly based on figures, and so in the biblical sense, they try to say that Jesus was not a real figure. Well, there's some historical basis to the fact that he was, that his name was modified. And there was actually like a 10-part series done by the History Channel, I think, about who was Jesus. And they actually went through the writings and of the knowledge of the time of how it looked like they morphed his name, and which we now know that. We know that Jesus was not his name, that was the name, the Roman name given to him, that would not be what he would be called by his people. So, but and even with Buddha, these are supposed to be based on real people. And honestly, I believe that Shiva is a real deity, and that he did great things, and that he's embodied by, even if in just an allegory and metaphor, he was a great.
I didn't even know this. I'm reading this right now, and it says the journey of Persephone is an ancient Greco-Roman story of the origins of the seasonal changes, and contains wisdom about the journey of the soul in the underworld. Persephone was the carefree daughter of Zeus and Demeter. I'm probably saying that wrong. The goddess of the grain. In ancient times, it was a perpetual spring. One day, while gathering flowers away from the watchful eye of her mother, she became entranced by the narcissus flower. Now, that's the narcissistic. That's the narcissus flower. So
the narcissus flower.
Yeah,
you
she became hypnotized by a narcissist, basically. I guess that's what that means.
Right. Right. Well, she was hypnotized by her own image. I think it's you get stuck in pathways. There's this really interesting medical disorder, which, this is what they think happens. It's actually a disorder of the brain that presents itself as a mental health disorder. Let's put it that way. So, because they haven't really proved all of these perceptions of what happens in the neurons and stuff of the brain. So it's called the Capgras syndrome. And it's when what your eyes see do not match what your mind knows. So what you'll do is one day you'll wake up and you will see your wife, but you won't believe that it's your wife. You'll believe that it looks just like your wife, but that your wife is actually a clone, and that your real wife has been replaced. So the imagery doesn't match perfectly the memory engram, right, of wife. Okay, and so the damage is supposed to be between the visual cortex and the cognitive center cortex of the brain, and so you basically what you see is not your reality. And we talked about this too, did we not? We talked about how
we did, and it's really interesting because I actually experienced someone like this. I think I shared with you that I was very close to, and that, was a great person, but he lived in an alternate reality, and he was abusing this drug ketamine, which is similar. I think it's similar to, it has the same effects as adrenochrome.
Well, it kind of messes with the same part of your brain. Like it's a very high end neurotoxin in humans, because it's made for horses. But the point of the Capgras concept is that that ketamine, this is brought about by usually brain injury, hypothyroidism, but in some documented cases, or a few, something like that, it's also brought on by ketamine abuse, or I guess overdose of ketamine. I don't know. It said, but by ketamine usage. So what I found incredible about that is that it imparts that there are neurotoxins that literally can create temporary aphasias between your senses, and so ketamine must alter your reality by totally maybe short circuiting your optic nerve, right? And so that's what it's doing. But in this case, it literally cuts off your brain's perception of it. I mean, it's a really weird construct, but that would also mean that there are certain drug abuses, which I believe the adrenochrome, that is possibly, the number one, probably the most expensive drug in the world, I would think, commodity that's being cultivated supposedly from our children, probably creates a type of same kind of disconnected psychosis. And that it would probably even be something where protracted use would be provable if you had ever used adrenochrome or had ever been an addict of adrenochrome, which would be, I would think, fairly an illegal drug, because I know that they can fabricate it. I don't know that adrenochrome is fabricated by anybody, who's supplying it. It seems to be a drug that's above the borders right now, but it could only, in my mind, be cultivated from blood products, human adrenal glands at this time in a mass scale. So if someone had ever used adrenochrome and there were any long-time brain effects, such as what crack cocaine would change the morphology of the brain, there's a lot of the drugs that people perceive to be very bad drugs that are basically chemical derivatives from God-given drugs, can cause brain deformity. So I was kind of looking at it as, well, if we have any question, we could probably always run a brain scan on people, and I bet we would find that these people have morphed their brains with these drug addictions, and are probably technically and by anatomical perspectives probably have shrunken ventricles and are psychotics by biological standards. I mean, we have there are actually biological markers for people with paranoid schizophrenia and stuff in their ventricle shapes and stuff. I bet these people, and that's what can only make sense to me on a biological process, is how these people have become so disconnected with reality. And that whole Capgras syndrome with ketamine totally set it off for me. These people are probably adrenochrome addicts, and they're probably categorically now biologically psychopaths by the formations or the functions of their brains. And, I think this is why this is going to come to a head. These people are just really nuts. I mean, that's what we're coming to find out.
Well, I couldn't figure out, what was wrong with him. Like, he would just go off into this alternate reality. I wouldn't see him for days, and all of a sudden he would show up and he would remember, like he would forget. And he was a great guy.
He gave himself a multiple personality disorder. That's what he was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, and that does it a lot. They call it spirits for a reason. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, people don't understand that there are drugs. The reason why you take drugs is because you want to shut off your senses, and so what those drugs do is they
detaches you. It detaches you from your emotions. So your emotions are connected. Yeah, in this paranoid reality. That's where you're no longer, your emotions aren't grounded in this realm.
You don't have emotions rooted in reality at all, because once you start modifying your perceptions and you start founding your perception, your reality on the absence of real perceptions on a regular basis, so therefore you're living in a half truth. Mm-hmm. You're founding everything that you have built your world upon on what you're feeling half of. Okay, that's not reality, folks. So that's the self-immolation of drug addiction, or even to modify self. I mean, like right now, here's the problem, though. I don't like to take pain meds or anything. I'm a real old hippie kid in that respect. I don't like taking pharmaceutical drugs. I don't even like taking aspirin. I don't even like Alka-Seltzer. I used to like to even put it on my tongue and let it fizz when I was a kid. It's kind of a fun thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I don't like taking anything. But when you get older and you start getting beat on, and you live in a culture where they inundate you with poisons in the air and in the water, and they electrify. I mean, my God, I went past some wind towers the other day near a university, and they were like supersized because they were right across from the arena. And I think they had to put these supersized wind towers pointed directly at this University of the State of Ohio horseshoe arena, so that when the people are in the football game, they can control them. I don't even know, but when I drove by it, I got sick. I mean, it really made me want to vomit from what I was feeling from it. Now, maybe it's because I have a cleaner diet or something, but the more you're inundated with that, I understand why a lot of people are like, I'm in pain all the time. It's because we're being bombarded with very unhealthy things that are actually antagonizing our bodies and causing us to have chronic stress syndromes, which we've talked about causes goiters and thyroid issues. It causes polycystic ovary disease, which causes infertility in women long term. It causes all of these problems, folks.
I have adrenal. What is it? Adrenal fatigue, or my adrenal gland is exhausted, and yeah, it's from being targeted for so many years. And then I have a goiter.
Sensitive to it.
It's all connected. And
absolutely,
they knew what they were doing to me.
Absolutely. Well, they knew that if they stressed you out, that it would eventually undo you anyway. Mm-hmm. Because it would cause you to have health disorders that may or may not be. And then when you get the health disorders, you just make money for their counterpart, the medical industrial complex. Yeah. That's hand in hand with your government to pollute your body so they can make a killing and racket you back into the health you shouldn't have ever lost, except by their hand in the first place, by sticking you with polluted immunity.
What we were talking about is how this adrenochrome affects the brain and how it can be tested. It can actually be medically
predict that it can be tested. That if you have ever been an addict of adrenochrome, that your brain is forever conformationally changed. And I think that's what we're seeing in some of these media, some of these movie folks that don't look so good all of a sudden, and look like they're about half dead and half deaf and bald. And
sorry about that.
That was funny, though. That was funny when it came up. It was like you were doing an old Wolfman Jack radio show dig.
Oh my God, you remember that guy? I used to listen to that guy when I was a kid.
He done that right then too. Whoa, baby! He would have said, "Yeah."
I've always been a fan of talk radio my whole life.
Oh, and that dude had it, didn't he?
I used to listen to Elvira. I used to listen to. I used to love Dennis Prager, and I used to listen to Wolfman Jack, Coast to Coast, George Norrie. Late at night, I'd be under my covers.
Right. Well, the fact that there was even radio on late at night was quite the deal. I want to talk about something really serious, though. I want to bring this to everybody's attention, and this is probably one of the more important things we're going to talk about. I want everyone to notice that they're up and coming that President Trump has given one of his finalists in his Supreme Court justice picks is a woman named Amy Coney Barrett. And she is from the Seventh Circuit. Okay. And I'm going to tell you that Donald Trump, after I tell you what's going on, probably had no idea of this woman, who she is. But and that she'd be a political nightmare for him, or probably everybody at this point in time. But he was probably handed this woman's name, and I'm going to tell you, I think she's a Manchurian leftover from Clinton administration. I think that she would have been the first pick from Hillary Clinton, even though she is a Republican. Supposedly, she is an ultra-Orthodox Catholic that apparently practices potentially, from what I heard from the early onset. Now it's a little scrubbed, so I can't bet this, but she is an ultra-Orthodox Catholic that subscribes to a controlled form of personal mentorship by someone called a handmaiden when you're a woman and a master when you're a man within the church who assists you in your daily decisions of your life. So this woman, and it was also reported because she is a mother of 6, there's a lot of kids in her family, but there was a report of 2 of them being adopted from Haiti. Now, let me explain about the 7th Circuit on this. Can you hear me? Are we good here?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I'm not sure if you have a bad connection. The 7th Circuit is the court where Clay, the clerk, there's 2 clerks in the state, in the United States court systems, an entire circuit, 2 circuits covered. The 6th Circuit and the 7th Circuit. The 7th Circuit, located in Chicago, is where this Amy Coney Barrett is a judge of. That clerk is the clerk that we have no signatures on any documents, only seals, and they have refused to docket a motion for en banc, which is allowed, because we copied every judge in it. We copied them because an en banc is when you request that every judge in bank, the whole panel, vote on the decision, basically certify the clerk's decision. And we asked for them to certify the clerk's decision to dismiss Clay's case and not forward it to the Supreme Court as the statutes required them to do, and to affirm the clerk's decision. They won't even docket that in the 7th. They have entered it onto the docket in the 6th Circuit as under the words tendered. Mm-hmm. And that's very important in law. So they have tendered it now in bank, the en banc petition to the 6th. But the 7th Circuit has blocked even the docketing of a motion for an en banc reconsideration in a case where the state clearly and openly kidnapped a child and can't even produce the federally required documentation to support his kidnapping. Mm-hmm. And that has been perpetuated for 3 years. This court that has just had a Supreme Court justice appoint a potential Supreme Court justice nominee. Well, she's a nominee. So this Amy Coney Barrett, who is now a nominee from Trump, unfortunately, for the Supreme Court, is from the 7th Circuit, who currently now has a case. They're named in a District of Columbia case. We have moved this to the District of Columbia in a writ of mandamus, and that case number for the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, where the 6th Circuit and the 7th Circuit are named in a writ of mandamus. This is not a civil action. Mm-hmm. This is us going to the District Court of D.C., petitioning the District Court of D.C. to command that these 2 courts follow the statutes, which they are clearly and openly violating. So we went to the highest district court in the United States court systems, the District Court in D.C., because in this case, since the courts are named and the Treasury is also noticed, and so are the administrative courts of the United States, they're all agencies in the District of Columbia. We moved to the District of Columbia District Court and said, you tell these agencies to follow the law, or we're going to have a problem. So that court is now named. So this judge from the 7th Circuit, who is an ultra-Orthodox Catholic, who would basically be a handmaiden to the Pope, and not be, because Orthodox Catholics are not Christians. They're the opposite of Christians. Orthodox Catholics believe if you do not follow that the Pope is your vicar, that it's okay for your baby's heads to be slammed up against the wall. That's where Jesuit orders come out of, folks. So she's a female Jesuit being propositioned as a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court of the United States. And she comes from a court that is blocking a clear and open case of state kidnapping of my son from moving forward by the law. They're clearly defrauding the statutes in their obstructions. This woman's a hot potato. And let me tell you why she's even a greater hot potato. Because she comes from the 7th, and the 7th Circuit's a very important case, or a circuit court, when it comes to how our child trafficking has been perpetuated and maintained in this country through the CPS systems. Because, see, in 1997, the 7th Circuit wrote this really great opinion in the Journal of the National Association of Administrative Law Judiciary, Volume 17, Issue 2, Article 10, on 10/15/1997. And I love the title, Possible Application of the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine to State Agency Decisions. The 7th Circuit's Opinion in Van Harken v. City of Chicago by Rebecca Schmucker. And the citation on that for the application of the Harken v. City of Chicago, it is under 1997. So they wrote this great opinion about how they want to expand the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine to the point where, in conclusion, and I will read the paragraph, although the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine has never been directly applied to a decision by a state agency, so they reached into a state agency decision, folks, that is independent of a state court, the opinion of the 7th Circuit in Van Harken expands the possible application of that doctrine given the right circumstances. If this doctrine is applied, states could set up a system of review for their agencies wherein agency decisions are not reviewable by any federal court other than the United States Supreme Court. A state could, for example, require that administrative adjudications of paternity and child support orders be registered with the clerk of court and can be accorded the same judicial effect as a judicial decision. In practical terms, this would ensure that only state courts could review such state agency decisions. Okay. I want everyone to understand that what this is, in its very statement, is an act of treason, because a decision came out of the 7th Circuit promoting the expansion of the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine that basically was plotting a means for states to be exempt from federal oversight for federally funded programs in the federal courts, except up all the way to the Supreme Court. So that would mean that they were promoting that states could do whatever they wanted until someone came along that had the money to wherewithal the case, and an attorney, mind you, an attorney must be enjoined in this, to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get your kids back. Because they could do this. They could require the administrative adjudication of paternity of a child and support orders be registered with the clerk, so they could register the requirement of a clerk's and make the man have to challenge even his paternity cases all the way to the Supreme Court, folks. This is an open declaration to undermine the balance of power between the federal and state agencies and executive authority of the federal executive branch over federally funded programs as they are executed in state judiciaries. Treason, and this is the case. This Rucker-Feldman Doctrine is named in a lot. How many times have we heard the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine used, Amelia, as an excuse to keep children in fraudulent custody against statutes, and also to tell parents they don't have any rights to sue or get them back or anything? And what they're basically doing is they've end around the constitutional balance of power. They've openly stated how they were going to expand it. You can't expand a grant of law. You can't expand a doctrine. You can extend a doctrine. You can't expand things in the law.
For example,
that means you're making it big.
You know, for example, there's no due process in the lower courts, and
that's what this
courts they're trafficking the children out of. And they routinely withhold evidence in these cases. And also in the higher courts as well, they use something called a motion in limine. And the judge can rule to exclude, pertinent evidence in your case, to have it withheld.
That's not lawful. It's not lawful or legal. And that's not all.
I wanted you to look it up. It's called a motion in limine.
Well, here's what I can tell you. A judge's job is pursuant to the Constitution, as annotated in the Constitution. As in the annotated Constitution, that was actually supported by the the Federal Reserve Act Supreme Court, it says that a judge is he's supposed to be the arbiter of the law. The arbiter. He's not the enforcer.
Well, a motion in limine, let me just clarify. It literally is like a threshold, is a motion discussed outside of the presence of the jury to request that certain testimony or evidence be excluded, and which is the motion is decided by the judge or by the civil or criminal proceedings.
It's parte hearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it just sounds. I'm curious how that is even.
Well, here's the problem with those types of. Here's the problem with those types of situations and scenarios. And I can just tell you this from personal experience. First off, there should be no conversations about what is allowed in evidence and what is not allowed in evidence by a singular union of attorneys in private conversation, where they go and they seem to like, well, what are we going to agree on is a fact here, and it be off the record. That's criminal. That's criminal in my mind. So these conversations between counsel, between union members that are off the record for a lot of these things, where they settle things off the bar, I think that those cannot be held up in law, and that there needs to be an annotation that there was evidence withheld made for those things. And I don't know that they always do. I can tell you that by the conversations off the record that are taken when there are objections. In my case, oh my gosh, I got pulled back for sidebar conversations, like for half the case, because I would say something and they wouldn't like what I was saying, and I'd be saying it perfectly the way you're supposed to, and they'd object, and we'd have I had so many arguments about what law was and what was allowed, where they were clearly in the back, in the sidebar conversations, which you never get to see. You see them in TV shows, where they were literally limiting. They limited testimony. They prevented evidence that was required by rules of evidence. I mean, there's all these, and those are obstructions of justice, and they're also denial of due process. So anytime a judge does stuff like that, he's automatically putting that case up to be subject to the denial of due process of law, because those conversations about evidence, if they are founded in law, those conversations are supposed to be had prior to trial. They're supposed to be had on discovery. They're supposed to be had orally or in writing. If there's a necessity to have a hearing, there should be a hearing. But if there's evidence that's exculpatory or stuff like that, I mean, these are just bad decorum. I mean, it's just bad process to have these private conversations not on the record about what is allowed and what isn't allowed in testimony cases, especially concerning third parties as children, who you are literally representing a third party that you have no rights in. You have nothing in. You're sitting there and you're treating it like a thing. Making decisions about stuff like that off written record, off a record of a hearing record. That seems just criminal in intent to me, and it's just bad decorum. It makes the practice of law look bad. It makes it look like a criminal enterprise, and it's unnecessary. What's the problem? They don't want to pay a transcriber. They're too good. They want to make their money themselves. They don't have, there's certain requirements here that need to be met for due process to exist. And I'm just going to say that those motions in limine sound like bad ideas if they're off the record. And if they're off the record, that in and of itself, in my mind, is a denial of due process for whoever got the short end of this case. Mm-hmm. Because you can't sit there and have those types of evidentiary discussions off the record and have it not be a denial of due process. Because if their argument was there collusion, you don't know, do you? Mm-hmm. Did anyone proffer an argument and a counter argument, or was there just collusion? Those things aren't allowed. Attorneys aren't supposed to collude to decide what is fact and what is law. What have I told people? Attorneys do three things. They prevent fact from being put on the record. They prevent law from being put on the record, and they cloud titles. That's what they do. And in doing those three things, they steal you blind. They are grifters by practice and trade. They grift for their king. That's what they have always done. Esquires come from squires. Go watch the old movies. The squires used to steal stuff for their knights, folks, okay? They're thieves, okay? They're squires. So these people by preventing fact and law from being put on the record and conspiring in these ex parte hearings. In my son's case, they had a whole custody hearing where only the mother and the father, because my son I'm his godfather. His father was allowed and the mother was allowed, and only the family members that were called to testify that basically forced themselves to be called in because they applied for adoption. Those are the only non-bar union members or non-bar union members allowed. If you were a bar union member from anywhere in the world, you could walk into the meeting. But if you were a non-bar union member, you were threatened with arrest and be put in jail for even attempting to approach the door. So they had a private bar union member. They thankfully, supposedly, had, or they didn't have a dictation there. They didn't have anybody dictating. They had a recording machine, but they didn't have a third-party private court reporter that the state statutes require them to have. Okay, so they basically just had a motion in limine, didn't they, for the custody of my son? Well, guess what? The federal statutes require them to produce a record of the case, a transcript of the case, if the case is ever presented by appeal, because the federal statutes say that that is the only evidence that the federal government will accept as proof that the state satisfied its federal statutory requirements. So in my son's case, they've already violated the statutes and can't prove their case pursuant to the requirements of the statute in the conveyance of his custody. That's been established. So where's my son? They can't even prove they had. It's called a non-suit. See, that's the problem with motions in limine. When you start letting bar union members have private conversations in judges' quarters without a transcriber that would be mandated to be part of the record, by law it's mandated to be part of the record pursuant to my understanding of the law. You're not supposed to have sidebar little private conversations where they conspire what's evidence and what's not. That's corruption, folks. That's corruption. That right there, okay, well, you take that. Well, let's just expand it to the whole dang courtroom and make it so that no one's allowed in but attorneys. Heck, we don't even need the victims here anymore. We're just going to put a TV in the room, and this guy in prison won't even get a ride out to the county anymore. He gets to sit in the hole, if that's where he's at, in front of a camera and be presented in court in 4 counties away, right? He doesn't even get to go on a ride to leave the prison. We're just going to try him as a TV camera in abstention. And everybody in the room's an attorney. Oh, wait, if it's for a kid, we don't even have a transcriber for it. See, it just gets to the point where it's just all criminal conspiracy because they're just having little private little discussions between themselves as to decide who gets what and who doesn't among other people's belongings, including your children. And the sad part about it is it was so obvious how they knew that they were so screwed in my son's case when they found out that I was associated with the case because the judge in the criminal case had enjoined me just by defaming me in court. Her criminal judge defamed me in court, and the man never met me, didn't even know me. Brought my name up in his case. Bad idea. Worst thing someone can do. Worst thing someone can do to invite me into one of their courts.
That's true.
Kids back, though, won't I? I'll get your kids back. You enjoin me. Mm-hmm. If they enjoin me, for sure. But for real, I mean, as soon as that was dumb. That was the dumbest thing he could have ever done. As soon as they figured that out, woo. But, I'm sitting here enjoined, and they're sitting here having ex parte testimony. It was so bad. The whole hearing about my son was more about why Ray, my wife, had let me come in on that. She's like, you're the one that talked bad about her. You know what? Why are you doing this? And it was so bad that Clay's father says to Ray, why are they talking more about your friend Lotus than my son in his custody case? She goes, I don't know. He even said that to the judge. Why are you talking about Lotus more than my son Clay? See, because they already knew. They already knew. They were already conspiring in his hearing, folks. They were conspiring in his hearing on how to remove me as a cause of action and a real party interest, though they didn't join me because they already knew that they were wrong, and I knew they were wrong and could prove they were wrong.
Lotus, I think I mentioned in the headline of the show that you have 14 cases.
In Clinton, we have brought 14 cases, and they're all named on the district court case. They're all enjoined. We've had to bring. I have brought every cause of action that their federal Title 28 federal civil and criminal appellate rules will allow, and in the Sixth Circuit, because of their administrative process and me studying it, I had 4 habeas corpus cases sitting in the Sixth Circuit, brought through the statutes and by appealed by right for both Ray and her son, and they tried to dismiss those cases under Rucker-Feldman, folks. The Sixth Circuit tried to dismiss 4 petitions for writ of habeas corpus, where the state won't even produce the transcripts of the hearings because they know that they would be shown to be in open treason and sedition and creating and affecting crimes upon the bench and frauds upon the statute. They were going to try to dismiss those by the Rucker-Feldman doctrine. So this woman up for the Supreme Court under Trump, do not support her, folks. She is a handmaiden for the Pope. You'd be letting the baby trafficking royal elite into your Supreme Court, coming right out of the Seventh Circuit, who have cultivated the Rucker-Feldman doctrine. Oh, hell no, folks. This is, Trump better spin this. And this, I see this as divine because, Trump's is just now getting this information. He didn't know what was going on with this court and these people. I've always said he's had bad counsel at his side. But I'm going to tell you, whoever threw him this bone, if she truly is an ultra-Orthodox Catholic who barely passed, I can't believe she's on the circuit court. And I from what I underhear, she barely got that confirmation from the Senate. Because I'm going to make sure if she's not removed off this loot too sweet, that everybody in the Senate that would even touch this woman, as far as asking her questions, knows exactly where she comes from and what she's enjoined in. We'll find out. So to me, it's just a divine providence of God handing us a dagger, or, them falling on a dagger, really. Mm-hmm. So my part is, but Trump's been handed he's been handed a hot potato, because this went straight to Clay's case, because they were defending her, going, she's never done anything but written one opinion, and another one been enjoined in a minority dissent of in-bank. Well, she's also been party to a court whose clerk has been allowed to obstruct justice and not docket motions to protect her interests. So there you go. Boom. What's that about? Mm-hmm. What's that about? So it almost looks like they're shielding these things because, these judges are culpable, folks. Those judges are supposed to affirm the decisions of clerks. That's required by the statute. So me asking the in-bank, hey, why isn't your clerk signing this? Why isn't there a signature on anything coming out of your court affirming that this complies with this statute? Them blocking those kinds of motions, that's treason, folks. That's against the Constitution in an attempt to undermine the laws of the United States. That's what people understand it. When these judges...
It seems like, like perjury and treason, you would think these would be very serious crimes,
It's rampant, these people. I mean, it's just like...
It just seems to be overlooked. It's like they pick and choose.
But judiciary granting immunity for kidnappers in counties. What do you expect? I mean, if your judiciary is lawless, you're a lawless nation. Mm-hmm. If you have judiciary full of people who think they can just ignore the statutes when it suits their union desires and lucre and whatever they're doing, that's insane. That's not government, folks. That's a criminal enterprise. You have a criminal enterprise operating within the roots of your government, surreptitiously affecting crimes against humanity, affecting a coup, murdering people, assassinating people, kidnapping babies, trafficking humans and drugs and guns and golly, wake up, folks. Gee, my knee. This is just...
I have a public platform. I have the radio show and I have my blogs, and I deal with the public. I have people of all different faiths and political persuasions, and it boggles my mind that we can have a coup within our government, campaigning to disarm us, remove our borders, and basically allow immigrants to invade and the objective is to destabilize us. So
it's also to provide children to the cartels of the Americas that aren't getting their needs satisfied because Trump is shutting down the trafficking. So it's also, the new president of Mexico, folks, which everyone's like, oh, Mexico's not a bad place. These people come here, whatever. The president of Mexico, his first act as a president, after telling his people to run and invade our border just by running across it, especially the children. Okay, think about this. This first act of the president is to lower the age of marriage to 12. That was his first act as the president of Mexico. And you know why he had to do that? Because he had to make the main state industry, child trafficking, a little more legitimate. Okay? So we have a problem, and here's the deal. They're not just feeding Mexicans to us. They're shipping our kids out. See, you all just think, you all have no idea that all it takes is corruption in these state agencies that have been, and to not have a strong federalist government to allow rampant drug trafficking. And when I say drug trafficking, that includes children, because they pull adrenochrome. This is the proposition here, folks. Adrenochrome is a highly sought after drug, which is it synthesized is adrenaline, human adrenaline. Okay, so it's human adrenaline, and they're cultivating it in children and they can get more out of kids because they scare real easily, right? So they're torturing our children and killing our children, bleeding our children, raping our children, snuffing our kids in order to cultivate this adrenochrome in their blood, then bleeding them and literally cultivating the commodity of adrenochrome. So our children are the drug commodity, folks. That's what the point is here. So when you think of drug trade across the border,
it's just such a horrible and impossible truth for people to
believe that there is a world order to people who think of children as a commodity and would bleed them, cultivate drugs off them, use them as sex toys, cultivate them as inbred servants. Yes, I get that. I mean, it's just repugnant.
This drug isn't necessarily illegal either, which is shocking to me. And they have synthetic adrenochrome as well.
Cultivated through babies, right? Well, all they would do is, if not, they would just get little baby pigs, and they would shock them over and 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 over again, and then they do it to them and bleed them, and they probably cultivate them like they do pig insulin, cultivated off them, because most insulin is cultivated from pig pancreas.
Apparently it's debated on whether it has psychoactive effects or whether it's actually healthy for you, but the effects and classification of the drug is said to be controversial because it's debated whether it has psychoactive or hallucinogenic effects. Although some tests subjects compared adrenochrome experience to like a mild LSD experience, it causes euphoria, confusion, change in train of thought, lack of judgment, poor insight, inability to concentrate. I think author Hunter S. Thompson mentions adrenochrome in his book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and it's also featured in the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with Johnny Depp.
What I would think is when you as a person would release the large amounts of adrenaline like we're talking about is when you're in excessive fear, and also when you are about to die, when when animals, it's after the fight or flight is given out, especially the flight where you just lay and die. and you're sitting there as the zebra getting your gut eaten out by the leopard, but you're still alive, you're getting a lot of adrenochrome. So what probably these people are describing is near-death experiences or death experiences, which are euphoric because they're not experiencing the pain of it. Mm-hmm. But it's probably all of the firing of all of the brain. So I'm going to tell you, if you're an adrenaline junkie, which this adrenochrome is adrenaline, it's a pure form of it. So if you're an adrenaline junkie, which we think being an adrenaline junkie is unhealthy, and it also creates a type of person who is prone to aggressive behaviors. You get more consumed with getting more adrenaline. You need more, and it's an addictive behavior. Mm-hmm. Adrenaline junkie, addictive. They have an addictive personality. They have adrenaline junkies are addictive in their behavior, mm-hmm. and they can become, a little off kilter in their desire to get more adrenaline and do more exciting things to give them that fun. Well, all you have to do is, if you're rich and famous, is to buy a drug.
But just the cultivation of it alone should make it illegal. Even if it doesn't have psychoactive effects, if that's debatable.
Well, I agree with that. I think anything that you would cultivate from a human against the will is illegal. Okay, I think there's a presumption that it's illegal in the manner they're cultivating it. It's just that these people think they're above the law. That's the whole point of law. I mean, according to this is the way I read Aristotle. There's natural law, which all men know and subscribe to by their innate character. If you were to agree with that, then that's when you get to Kant and not the nomenon of Kant. Okay, him and Aristotle believe both in natural law being an inherent aspect of humanity. Okay, then you have the people who believe in statutes. Well, Aristotle says statutes we're flawed men, basically create states of men to try to make you feel lesser than them. That these statutes are merely an oppression of states of men to create iniquity. One being they're the state and you're not. I mean, there's the presumption of that argument. If you're under a statutory construct, if you don't have a government that treats the people as equal to the government, then you have iniquity. Okay, inequality between the state and man. So the state has created iniquity with the statutes that it's imposing upon us, and it's not supposed to. We're a republic, mm-hmm. and the way it's created iniquity is by not following them in the regard when it comes to the stealing of our children. They're literally just criminals in robes violating the statutes. They're okay. When judges willfully violate the statutes to take children from the custody of individuals, they are criminals, and they are not protected from being sued. That is a case law, folks. That's a case law. I'll find that case law in about 2 seconds. They have it right here. And it's a recently decided case law. It's not even like an old case law. It's like recently decided, but it's affirming a clear fact of what most would perceive as law. Once you operate outside the law, you no longer have the protections of the seat of government. The people are not going to insure you. The people are not going to agree with your behavior. And we're definitely not going to defend you in a criminal claim. I mean, that's crazy. Why would we defend a criminal who violated the statutes willfully in a criminal claim? And don't say you didn't know the law. You're a judge. You're supposed to. That's the thing. They seem to think that no one will hold them accountable. Well, you know why they think that? Because the Seventh Circuit cultivated a coup to expand the Rucker-Feldman doctrine and try to make state agencies. Do you understand state agency action? They basically, through the Rucker-Feldman doctrine, have made it so states, in any state agency action, that even means Job and Family Services, Workers' Rights Bureau, any state agency action, they could apply the Rucker-Feldman doctrine and just give the state immunity to do whatever it wanted in a base judicial decision with no affirmations by any courts. The state could just pass on it and say, we're not going to hear it. The feds say we pass on it, and we're going to make them immune on top of that. And so you sit there and go through this whole process, which takes millions of dollars if you do it with an attorney at minimum. I mean, watch these famous cases, folks. It's an impediment and an intentional obstruction and a bar to justice and due process and remedy and relief. To do that to poor and disenfranchised single mothers, people that are already poor, and they push them further into victimization. It's disgusting. It's repugnant. It's contrived. It's designed human trafficking from the poor. That's what the Seventh Circuit opinion has evolved into. So the fact that this woman just got named as a Supreme Court justice, in my mind, I see this as God saying, here, let's go look at what they do down there. Because it's gross. It's gross. And now you have someone who would be in agreement because she believes that the Pope is her vicar. She doesn't believe the people are her vicar, folks. She believes the Pope is her judge. She doesn't believe the people and God are her judge. She believes the Pope is her judge at the end of her days. And according to the rules, the proposed religion that she's part of, again, we're going to find out if these things are true, if she's been named as Supreme Court justice. Don't you think? Don't you should find out if she belongs to some extreme Orthodox Christian faith, Amelia, if she does, pursuant to what the Senate should be looking into?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
I would think.
Yeah.
I said, don't you think that we would be able to find out and vet everything about this woman pursuant to what her religious beliefs are?
Uh-huh.
I would think.
You would think.
I would think that would be the Senate's job.
I mean, we have what is it, Justice Ginsburg, who is openly, pro pedophilia, and
right.
I think she wrote a brief actually on lowering the age of consent. TED Talks really disappointing for me.
To win what age?
I think it was 12 to lower the age of consent, but I actually think it's even younger than that. Like they want to eliminate it. They want.
Okay. Because talking about age of consent to
really
to do what? To have
really disappointing. Okay, wait. We've talked. You remember Justice Ginsburg's brief? I think we spoke to that already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know, but she's just. But are we talking about in all things? So children are able to consent to all forms of contract at 12.
I think it was 12. Don't quote me right now, but I want to bring this up because this is big. Okay, we mentioned that the Libertarian Party had refused to denounce a known pedophile in their party, and I think I mentioned that in the last show. I don't have the notes pulled up, but then we also have TED Talks, and I really actually like TED Talks, and there's a seminar promoting pedophilia as a natural sexual orientation, folks. So now we officially have the Libertarian Party, which is identified as pro-pedophilia, campaigning, and then we also have TED Talk seminars promoting pedophilia as a natural sexual orientation. I bring this up because I am obviously I'm against exploitation of children.
Promoting pedophilia?
Yeah.
Or they're just exposing someone's doing that?
No, it's the seminar promotes pedophilia as a natural sexual orientation. Victims outraged by the encouragement of child abuse and mental health professionals, because apparently the mental health community is also, not opposed to this. So I posted it in Social Media News Network if you want to check it out. That's concerning.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'm going to say about that, because then I think this needs to be had, and I can have this conversation because I know what I'm talking about. Okay, you know how in the straight community there's normal straight people, and then there's straight people that have sexual problems and fetishes, and they're criminal sexually? The same thing happens in the gay community, and this is what I'm going to tell you. In my exposure to the gay community, which has been pretty much my whole life, there are people that in the gay community, it's a more accepted type of thing to have a sexual fetish. And really the line is drawn between people, mature adults of consent. Well, there are also people who hide within those communities that are more open about what type of sexual behavior they will accept between two consenting adults, or 3 or 4, whatever, but it's through consent. There are always people who hide within those groups that are just like straight people who are rapists that hide in the straight sexual community. There are gay fetish people that are rapists and pedophiles, just like they're in the straights, so this perception that because someone is gay, that has anything to do with them not being a rapist, or that they're a rapist because they're gay, is ridiculous, because there are straight rapists and gay rapists. There are straight pedophiles and gay pedophiles. They're still criminals.
Did you see this book that I published, The Eaters of the Children?
Yeah.
The Pedocracy Exposed. It's a foreword by Philippe Robles. How access to power is granted through the rape and torture and ritualistic slaughter of the innocent. This is a book.
I have no doubt. It talks about, because it's contrived secrecy. Here, there's a great quote from Benjamin Franklin. I love the man, the father of the junta. Remember that, the father of the junta, the political junta. He said, a secret can be kept by 3 if 2 are dead. See, they understood that. When they started our Constitution and our Republic, they already knew without a doubt that the European monarchy had been taken over and consumed by deceit, fraud, mayhem, treason, sedition, and Satanism. Just balls out, just the Dark Ages, folks, the Dark Ages. And that the monarchies of Europe had fallen from reason, and that they were basically just corrupted, absolutely, by some secret orders that had infiltrated the ranks. Our government was started, folks, by the second sons and daughters of the monarchies of Europe fleeing Satanism and fleeing the corruptions of Europe. And they were sent over here and given the rights of kings and queens of themselves to create legislatural writ, and granted the right of chancery in legislatures to create king's bench law in order to create a more perfect union of people that did not subscribe to Babylonian banking, did not subscribe to feudalism and vassaldom, and were a great republic. So we are created with the manifest destiny to be the system of equitable government, even in commerce, where all are equal. To take over these corruptions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we're here for. These people.
I want to make sure that I bring this up really briefly. I'm sorry. I just need to interject this because I don't want to just throw stuff out there and then not have, the names and so forth, like you said. The Libertarian Party call to action, hashtag NOLA, is a post in Social Media News Network. Why does Nick Sarwark, chair of the Libertarian Party and candidate for Phoenix mayor, continue to reportedly protect the pro-pedo and the pedos of the Libertarian Party? Libertarian Party delegates run a resolution on Monday that the Libertarian Party condemns pedophilia or hebephilia and the sexual exploitation of children. I hope that they do answer to this and that this is not the case, but as it stands right now, the record shows that the council ruled in Arvin's statements about aged adults having sex with kids under 16 is libertarian. Joe Burns just called out Sarwark for allowing a self-acclaimed pedophile to have a lifetime membership in the Libertarian Party. Hopefully I get a response on this because I posted it.
How can you say that's a libertarian? How can you say that that's a point of liberty whenever the liberty you profess leans the liberty of another? I don't even get that. That's just psychotic. You see, that's the stuff that's psychotic to me. But I think we discussed the Libertarian Party, and I told you that in my research for the Libertarian Party, whenever I ran 7 wards for the Kerry presidential campaign in Central Corridor of Ohio, that the Libertarian Party of Ohio was backed by the Heritage Foundation rooted in Texas. And that people would be very surprised. If you do any research about anything in politics and you know it's a business, you understand that there are no parties in this country. They are all corporations, all controlled by the same unions. The Libertarian Party for the state of every state, if you look it up in a business listing, as is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they will have a representative state agent. They are mere corporate charters held by attorneys, folks. These are not your de jure parties. They're not the de jure electors. You really have no idea the ruse we live under. But your government are mere corporate fictions emulating the de jure instruments of law. And they are all controlled by bar union members. It is a house of cards, is it not, Amelia? But it's all divine, and it's all going to be great because we're all going to flip the bar, and the good attorneys, there are good attorneys, there are good judges, there are good cops, there are good everybody. There are bad ones, too. There are bad teachers, there are bad carpenters, there are white rapists and black rapists and green rapists, and there's straight rapists, and people need to stop looking at this as just because pedophiles are trying to hide in the gay community doesn't mean all gay people are pedophiles, and they certainly don't support it. But you try to say that to some person who's hell-bent on categorizing what adults do consensually between each other as their judge of what's right and wrong versus what's being consented between an adult and a non-consenting child. I mean, in my mind, people who are arguing the distinctions between what consenting adults do when it comes to straight, gay, black, white, I don't even care, versus what adults are doing against children is a huge. That to me, when you're arguing more about between adults and what's done to children, you're just a tool at best, and if not, you're a shill trying to draw attention from the central issue of our time. There's only one issue of our time, folks, and that's what they're doing to the babies. That's what they're doing to the little ones. If they're doing it to the little ones, I guarantee you they'll do it to the big ones if they aren't already doing it to the big ones. So if you stop what they're doing to the little ones, it stops it for everyone. That's the point of it. No one should be trafficked. But if you're not motivated about the trafficking of people in prisons and you don't really want to hear about how most people in prison committed no crimes against the law and that they've just statutized, they've taxed behavior, prison is now a form of taxation, folks. That's what it is. Prison is a form of taxation without representation. But they just put you on a farm where they still make money on you because you were a belligerent to their statutes, which aren't even necessarily criminal offenses in the law. You could walk backwards on a Friday with your eyes crossed the way these attorneys invoke the law, and you could find your butt in prison for 10 years. I promise you. They're that lawless. I've seen it. I've been through it. I've seen it. I can speak to it firsthand. So anybody wants to argue with me, bad idea.
They intentionally, nowadays you go to get a divorce and your children get trafficked by CPS. And the divorce itself lasts as long as the children's childhood, which can never be replaced.
Well, the interesting thing is we found out, just interesting, like a couple of months.
Something's wrong.
Oh my gosh. You think? And they hold you in we're in bankruptcy, and that's, we talked about Templar estates and stuff, but here's the case law I was telling everybody about. And this is a case law that proves, and it was cited in January 23rd, 2018. So this is hot off the press from the Ninth Circuit. See, the Ninth Circuit's doing their job, folks. The Ninth Circuit's doing their job. This isn't every circuit. This isn't every judge. But you definitely have pockets of corruption in this country where there needs to be a mass cleansing of branches of government and system. I mean, it's bad. It's bad, folks. And it's been allowed to ruminate, I think, probably since Kennedy. I think that when we didn't find out who was pivotal in that, well, actually it started since Lincoln, if you want to talk about it for truth, but even in the modern era. And I think people need to understand that every time we've had a change of where our government lies and trusts, they've tried to kill a president or have succeeded in killing a president, and in the past. And with Kennedy, I think that they killed him because he knew what was going on here, folks. He knew what they were getting ready to do with the Fed Act. So, but this is a case law hot off the press where this Ninth Circuit is doing its job. And I've watched this. You can actually watch this discussion about this case on YouTube. So I even like that about the Ninth Circuit. You can watch it on YouTube and watch their discussion about this case, and then read the I've read pretty good, and it's pretty good opinion. And what it states basically is that, and it has greater bodies of case law in it, which is an even better thing, that they brought forth proof of some of their arguments in better, more deeply rooted in case law establishment of facts in positive law. And it basically says that the minute an agent of state operates outside the mandate of the statutes or the law, they are no longer protected from personal liability and can be not only sued but brought into criminal cases too. But what they like you to do is bring them to the civil case first, and then the criminal. That's what they like to tell you. But you shouldn't have to. The state should already be reviewing these courts. This case should have never come to the case it was in the Ninth Circuit. If the state had done its job in the first place and prevented these children from being taken from this family, they would have never had the requirement to sue them to get compensation. So the case number is with the Ninth Circuit. It's Lisa Damari and Anthony Damari as plaintiffs and appellants versus the Laura Penderson and Amy Van Ness. This is case number 1416207. It's a DC number 2:11 CV is in civil 00046 ROS. And again, it was filed on January 23rd, 2018. So all you people who's where they take children outside statutes, and this specifically speaks to a case where children were taken without due process of law and seized without a warrant when there was no emergency need. And they go through very diligently, if you listen to the argument on YouTube, and they speak of it in here, how there's case law where children were being even abused sexually, and the courts found that was not even emergent use for seizure. So when the course for abuse of a child is very defined under federal statutes, and they affirm that here. So anybody whose children have been taken without a warrant under the auspices of it being an emergency seizure, and your children really, families were not, lives were not in danger, your case is covered under this. And they say that is against the law in this case, and they say not only was it a violation of the law by the established case law, but that the people who took those kids were personally liable for the crimes and the civil liability in any suits that come against them. So this is a very important case in child custody cases. So here you have the Ninth Circuit saying that CPS workers of the state are liable, and then you have the Sixth and Seventh Circuit saying we're going to give them immunity. It's just that inconsistency, though, folks, in our court system should not exist. Should not exist. And that right there is just a clear indication that something's broken. Somebody is not following the law. Someone's following an administrative process or an opinion or doctrine or plan. They're operating ex parte, Clearly, the national, the National Association of Administrative Law Judiciary should probably be asked how they think they have the authority to expand the law, to promote the expansion of the law. That would be an interesting question for the administrative law judges, because that's clearly in the constitutional construct, and that's been defined by de jure judges in Maxwell v. Dow, I think, and also in Hunter v. Maxwell. So there's several cases where the expansion of the law has been declared unconstitutional, clearly. So anytime a judge uses the word to expand something, that's a big open-faced no-no in the Constitution. And so if this is what if she was put upon this case, this court, this woman has been suggested by Trump to promote the agenda of the Seventh Circuit, where they have a perfect candidate as a handmaiden for the Pope. Mm-hmm. This kind of, I've actually told people that are in the ability to, through their corridors, get word to Trump about the scenario that's coming up, and I'm sure he'll hear about it, because he's getting ready to get a copy the case file that we filed in D.C. on my son in district court, the 118 MC 00086. And those case files in the Sixth Circuit are 173506 for the Sixth Circuit and 172879 for the Seventh Circuit. And so they're going to figure it out, but I just see it as an opportunity to have a discussion about Clay's case and the CPS case and this Rucker-Feldman doctrine. I think the Rucker-Feldman doctrine and it should be a priority to be brought up in a Supreme Court justice hearing from some woman from the Seventh. That's what I think, because she's working for the court that's promoting it and allowing crimes against the statute in order to block cases against it. That's how bad it is.
We can actually see, Lotus, states like California, we had like Los Angeles, where there's epidemic levels of homeless people, and San Francisco and New York City. These states mainly voted Democrat. Okay. We know they're contriving poverty so that they have this vulnerable class of people to prey on. That's what they do. Yeah.
That's Feldman. Let me read the title of this article called in the Journal of National Association of Administrative Law Judiciary, Volume 17, Issue 2, Article 10, from October 15, 1957. Possible application of the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine to state agency decisions. So, and what they're doing in doing that is they're actually being truthful in that they're saying the fact is that the state agency is a private institution because you're not really being managed or governed by a lawful government. You're being managed by an administrative process, being supposed to be through the executive branch off the restructuring of the government through the Federal Reserve Act. Except, of course, in Title IV programs where they just steal them right through the judiciary out of our country, the states. So that's what you really got here. So Title V was enacted, Federal Reserve Act changed the structure of the government and created the implementation, the ability to implement social services programs, Social Security Act, all these acts, Medicaid, Medicare, okay? That's what came out of the Great Deal, the New Deal and all this stuff after World War II. So the executive branch became the implementer of programs that the congressional legislation created in Title IV, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, veterans benefits. So all the benefits that people live on now in the state-managed programs, because the states now particularly manage Medicaid, Medicare. Social Security Administration still manages your main Social Security benefits, and the Medicaid, Medicare programs of the states are actually supervised by the federal government. But then you have this Title IV program, which concerns the custody of children who benefit from all these programs. The Title IV programs on the Medicaid, Medicare, the health care benefits under child dependency, all the programs that children would benefit in childhood, the ability for the state to seize the child to get the benefits of that program under state custody instead of familial custody are not being monitored at all. So the states are stealing the children so they can go into these state-managed programs and just feed themselves. I mean, you have to understand what they're doing here. They're moving children from the family unit to the state custody so the state can get more dependents, folks. It's contrived fascism and socialism and everything. It's actually like forced eat upon the system fascism, where the middle management, these corporate states, which are not even republic de jure states, are eating off the substance of the people, stealing babies, defrauding the federal programs. I mean, it's just disgusting what's happened to our country. And it's all because a bunch of attorneys who were declared the bulwark of the Communist Party of Europe, which isn't communism, folks. It's fascism and Leninism and Marxism. They were declared the bulwark of the Communist Party, and they're running your government now. And it's not even lawful that they're running your government. It's against the statutes for the judges of the circuit courts and the district courts and the federal Supreme Court, all the courts in D.C., to exercise the profession of an attorney. Well, when you have a Supreme Court that says you have to be an attorney to argue before them, that's a violation of that statute. I'm pretty sure when you make someone have to be an attorney to even talk to you in the law, that's pretty much an exercise of the profession. That's a violation of the Judicial Act, folks. So your Supreme Court of the United States and D.C. is violating the federal statutes. Okay, who's going to fix that? is going to fix that. Because the bar union has cooed the government, and if we're not going to get remedy, we have no government. I do what I do. I say what I say. I preach what I preach. I teach what I teach. I do what I do to educate these morons in our government who are willfully ignoring the law of what's going to happen to them and the country if they don't straighten up. Because we are at a precipice. Our government is daily, and I don't think people perceive this because we're so used to the American process, but we could have a great shift in our government that was monumentally to the detriment of the American people any time of the day anymore, people, because you have agents in your government who have contrived to coup you. You have an FBI that was listening in on the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party who had no criminal history or ties to any criminal conspiracy. They had people embedded in his camp trying to manipulate his march to the POTUS, but they shut down, and at the same time, the same agency shut down an investigation on the other Democratic candidate who used to be in office as an agent of state, and in that office potentially committed international crimes and federal felonies. Mm-hmm. So you're going to shut down the investigation into your friend who's a federal felon and an international human trafficker potentially, and conspiring to undermine other nations by the sale of uranium. And I mean, that's the stuff they did, folks. But you're going to send moles to listen to conversations to a guy where there's no criminal history whatsoever of anything. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's gross. It's starting to look gross. And we talked about, you said, well, I wonder if they're worried about hanging when you said about where are they trying to propose.
Yeah, because I saw that, lynching is already obviously illegal, right? And I saw that Kamala Harris was campaigning, to criminalize lynching, public lynchings, and I just thought, wow, it's already illegal. Why is she campaigning?
Lynching is a lawful process. See, we're not just going to allow them to run by their surety anymore. I mean, these are people. They've been doing this a long time, folks, and they just keep coming back. We keep warning them. Jesus warned them. Moses warned them. They've been warned. They've been warned, and we're going to get rid of them. We're going to get rid of them. So they should be concerned about public lynchings, but I don't think that the people who are going to demand lynchings give a crap about what's legal. They run by the law, and the law is very clear to a Christian what is to be done to someone who traffics children and is a pedophile. Mm-hmm. If you are in a system of state, if you are a state agent operating under the color of law and you have touched human trafficking for your own personal gain and lucre, you shall die. Mm-hmm. That is the law. That's actually under the federal statutes, under Title 18, 241 and 242. If it's a criminal conspiracy against a child and the child dies, the sentence is life, is death. Not life, but death. It's life if the child is harmed. So the minimum that Title 18 demands for anybody who has willfully or knowingly perpetuated or perpetrated a kidnapping of a child is under Title 18. If you're a state of agent, if you've harmed them, that's life in prison. That's the mandatory sentence under Title 18 in the annotations I've read for crimes against children. So if the child is kidnapped, it's life. If the child is dead, you die. Mm-hmm. It's death. So because the way, and I agree with that completely, because if you harm a child, you have sentenced that child's life to be completely different, and you should spend the rest of your life completely different too. In a cell that's at minimum, at most 3 by 5, mm-hmm. And all steel. Those people are disgusting. And I said, I didn't know it was going to harm kids. And so, these child traffickers, as far as I'm concerned, start doing Title 18. And I'm going to tell you, if there's any connection, and this is the whole thing with the Mexican president down there, the Mexican president is a cartel president. From his first act of presidency, it looks as he is a human trafficking cartel president, that he is in the pockets of the cartels. I guess they killed all the other ones till they found one who they liked, because I think they said something like over 100 assassinations by of people who were trying to run for government that were assassinated by cartel or something down there in criminality in Mexico in this election law. So people hate America, but we don't have the hundreds of people being murdered by the mob in our country during elections. So speak for yourself when you say you can't stand this country. Go move to Mexico for one election cycle, and then you'll shut up. So they had 100 people that they assassinated down there during their elections that were running, and I guess they finally ran out of legitimate people. But this guy is now the president, and so I guess he passed the cartel test. And his first act as president is to lower the marriage age of the child married, or whatever the case is, contracting age. So you guys, now you know why there's all these kids running to our borders unsupervised without any parents, which that's a lot. There are children presenting at our borders with no parents, folks, running from Mexico, okay? And you know who helped that president get elected? Your good friend Obama, who gave one cartel that now runs Mexico all its guns that allowed it to shoot all of its competition dead. You can thank President Obama for what's happening in Mexico right now.
Well, and some people would debate that this has been going on longer than Obama, and
Obama is directly responsible for that.
That goes back to Obama, Clinton, and Bush.
Well, each one worked their way up the peninsula. Absolutely. Carter did Panama Canal. Mm-hmm. Carter gave Panama Canal away. Okay. Then we'll go to the Nicaragua. Right. Then you have Bush. He moved it up. Then you have Clinton with NAFTA, and then you had Obama. It doesn't matter the party. They've all been slowly undermining either our necessity to invade Mexico or to be invaded by Mexico. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's been cultivated through foreign policy, and in most cases that we discussed, illegal and unlawful foreign policy. What I'm speaking to is the Fast and Furious gun running. The Fast and Furious gun running that was unlawful. People should go to prison. They should have been shot. They should run. I don't care. This Nicaragua, the Oliver North stuff, committing treason. I am tired of agents of state being able to do. If I did what Oliver North did, I would have been shot dead. Okay? I would have been hung.
I think what I want to know and what people want to know, is there an end to the child sex trafficking?
Well, that's the whole thing. When are you going to stop? You're just going to keep letting people steal your kids? When are the people going to not tolerate it? What does the government really think we're going to watch the judiciary steal our babies? If your government is noticed, which they're being noticed to me.
The first human trafficking guilty verdict in Sarasota, Florida, was handed down last week to Ronald McBride III, 22, for 6 felony counts, one of which was human trafficking. After the jury's conviction, McBride could face up to life in prison. It is a milestone case for Sarasota Police Department. According to news report, the trafficker began grooming the victim in November 2015 on how to trade her body for drugs and money. The young woman was in her 20s, receiving counseling for drug addiction at the time she met McBride. Instead, McBride got the victim hooked on heroin and crack cocaine. The girl told the Sarasota police.
In the system?
Yeah.
Oh, life. According to, if the state doesn't pick up life charges, the feds need to pick him up and put him under conspiracy of Title 18, Title 242, 241. See, that's what the feds have yet to. I don't know if the feds have ever imposed that, but if they don't, they need to pick his ass up and put him. But you know what? The fed prison is a lot cushier than state prison. I hope he spends his life in a state pen, because they're not nearly as nice. The fed system's too good for a schmuck like him. Mm-hmm. That's disgusting. And you know what? It's good. Clean up their union. All we're doing is asking the people to put their own unions under the same law. They're tyrannizing on us. See, if these people were upholding a law upon themselves, because see, we're not supposed to be subject to the statutes. The statutes are there for them. Those are the limits of their jurisdictions and actions. And when it says in the federal statutes that the court shall not interfere with the conveyance of custody to another state when a family applies for adoption. Okay. It means shall not do it.
And in other news stories, Lotus, we have a former member of the Army National Guard, former Ogden, is accused of possessing more than 1,000 files of child pornography. Justin Jones Andrews, 41, was booked in jail on 50 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, all second-degree felonies. He's being held at the Weber County Jail in lieu of a $500,000 bond. This was on June 26. Local law enforcement was contacted by the National Guard's Criminal Investigation Command. So, military investigators seized the gunman's electronic devices and disarmed him. The man, whom police say is Andrews, was then sent back to his home in Utah. An Ogden judge signed off on a warrant to search Andrews' home, which investigators did, and shortly thereafter they found images of pornography involving young girls. According to the indictment, all materials were seized from his home. So these are people in our system, in our government system. These are not just civilians committing these crimes.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Again, there's rapists in the white, straight, there's straight rapists, there's gay rapists, there's cop rapists. People need to stop looking at, they need to start viewing people for their actions and not the masks of state. When you see a cop beat a man, it's a man beating a man. Stop looking at it as a cop beating a man and go, would another man be able to do that to him? And guess what? Under our law, they can't. They can't do that. There's certain rules that have to be abided by. Everybody has to abide by the same rules. Ex-Secretary of State.
It seems like there's a second set of rules in the court if you belong to or you're affiliated with some of these secret organizations. Then if you're a pedophile, then you're protected. You're protected under a different set of laws and rules. There's two different. It seems to be to me that there's two different laws, set of rules for.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and what's funny is they're supposed to abide by this. The statutes are not for the living man. I remember. Let's say this again. According to the Judicial Act, which created the Article 3 courts. The Article 3 courts have no jurisdiction in crimes, common law crimes against the United States, which means they only have jurisdiction in statutes against criminal statutes against the United States.
Listen to this. This is a global issue, guys, okay? This is a global issue. Christopher Charles Inglevalson. I may not be pronouncing his last name correctly. He's 42.
Stuff all day, go with the flow.
A long-term close friend of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been found guilty of child pornography charges after being caught directing an international pedophile ring. International.
Well, that's a pretty one. It's just dominoes. I tell you, people need to be prepared for the roller coaster, and it makes me sick. It makes me sick. We talk about it. You know what? We were just talking about the other day, and I probably have to go spend some time with my family. But remember when we started out, and I'd call you whenever I had a chance, and we'd have to hang up because Ray called, and it was like, "Hey, I got some news for you." It was like breaking news. I mean, this is just, and in thinking about that, I was like, well, you've been documenting Ray and Clay's case from the get, really, in a lot of ways, right after we started it. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, this is just crazy. This is, if people even understood the divinity, and we're way into Revelations, folks. We're to the point in Revelations. We're to where the two pillars are going to judge the whore of Babylon, and the books shall be opened, and the seals broken, and the saints. We're to that point in Revelations, because that's what's happening here. I mean, the resurrection's already upon us because people are waking up. And we've been presumed dead.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's all Mount and allegory. It's all metaphor and allegory. And then back to that about the Jesus comment. When Jesus found Sophia and he saw his light shone upon her, and then reflecting upon her plight. It's like basically he empathized. He found empathy in the plight of the abandoned woman left to dwell in darkness. Is what it is. It's the empathy. Whoa. So the 24th degree of Masonry, which is the crown, their concept of the Masons in heaven, is when men learn to have empathy for women left in abandonment to care for children or just treated badly. Because if the men won't have empathy for the bearers of their children, then you have no society, and you'll never have heaven on earth. You'll live in purgatory. You'll live where everybody is from one end to the other, either in heaven or in purgatory.
And a lot are choosing to not adult, not husband, community, and family.
Well, and that's fine too. Well, that's okay too. I mean, you don't have to. You can husband a society. Well, you don't have to be married to a woman.
We all have free will. It's a choice, but we don't. We have a lot. We don't have a lot of fathers in homes nowadays. We don't have traditional family units anymore.
It's been stolen by the state, and that's another issue too. The breaking up of families, taking men away. I mean, that's the whole point of as they said, the communists said they would come for the family in America and destabilize that way. They have, but they still haven't destabilized. We're very strong as a people, and we will come to this call. I know we will, because that's our manifest destiny. But these. The whole purpose of a government is to protect the infant, the insane, and the infirm, and to perpetuate the purpose of law and the making of law is to improve a better civil society for all, where things are made better by law. So if the laws are not making things better, then they're bad law, and that's just a principle of law. So but again, lowering the limit to child trafficking to 12, which makes it better for pedophiles but not for babies, is clearly not law, folks. Okay, you have to look at it that way. All law is supposed to create equity and parity. Okay, so they're giving parity to a 12-year-old girl and a 50-year-old man, or an 80-year-old man, or a 20-year-old man. That's even worse, really. Mm-hmm. So is there parity in saying that a 12-year-old can create and can protect themselves verbally and emotionally and legally without an appointment? Because here's what I'm going to say. So does that mean that 12-year-old kids in custody can now say, okay, I don't want to live with my dad anymore, I want to live with my mom? And they're going to take their depositions and take their witness statements as truth and fact? Because, see, they still deprive children in our country of due process up until like 21. So they're going to make children subject to marriage but not give them the right to testify. I mean, you don't even understand the contrived nature of these types of constructs, folks. You have to think of the equity. Is a 12-year-old equitable to those she's going to be subjected to have to be made to marry? And are you going to say that you can guarantee that 12-year-old was willful and every time that she marries that 80-year-old dude or that 20-year-old dude? I mean, truly, we're not talking about 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds. This isn't Little House on the Prairie. Mm-hmm. We're talking about disgusting reprobate behavior between states of men who like to, have sex with children, who are trying to legitimize and legalize child trafficking and pedophilia. There are rules, folks. There are spiritual, moral mores in our country that this is repugnant to. Mm-hmm. And that's trying to bring here, and that's what they're trying to subject our children to in these courts. If the state
I just want to say, it's really, I feel very blessed, and it's truly, truly amazing how organically, I've been inspired to create Social Media News Network, and I've how all of these platforms are coming together. You and Zeph and
absolutely
Angie and with Victorious Libertas. I want to talk about that really quick because I'm going to be doing a live interview on Victorious Libertas coming up here. Stay tuned and look for blog updates. I'm going to be going on BitChute, and I'm going to be going on their show and talking about updates, with everything that's going to, coming together, and it's formulating, and it's just really inspiring to me. And I love your work. You're amazing to me. Zeph Daniels is amazing to me. It's just, it feels like it's just having all of this so much brought to light. It makes you feel alive. It gives you hope.
But yeah, there's at least hope. I mean, I've brought the case to the bar proper. It's associated with my case. It's hard to undermine.
You have 14 cases in the courts, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me, because I was in the courts for 5 years.
Clay, right.
Yeah.
But that's not counting my cases. I mean, that's not counting the cases I've established in the courts. Where basically when I went to prison, after I got to prison, I realized that I couldn't get remedy in the courts. And so my goal was, well, if my son can't get remedy knowing when I know what they did to him, then no one can. And that's really the point. If children are not so protected, when the children are being subjected to systems of administrative process where the burden of proof upon their mother and father is so extremely predictably extraneous that a mother of the quality of Ray, of the status and standing and character and where she come from, could never even possibly get her son back. That's a denial of due process for Clay. And so there's a clear and evident contrived desire to deny Clay the right to his family, which he was born to. There was reasons in law to require them to return him that they didn't follow willfully and openly, that are open violations of statute. And so for the government to say, the government of the United States to say that the states of the United States can take babies in custody and violate the federal statutes and still get paid and not have to have our baby get back, not to bring our babies back, and that we have to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get remedy and relief, that is unconstitutional in and of itself. So basically the court systems have become unconstitutional in a totality. I shouldn't have to even touch Supreme Court to have my son returned. I should have never. He should have never been taken. First off, and even if he was taken that one day, he should have been returned very quickly. And they didn't do that. And then they perpetuated his kidnapping. They obstructed justice in her imprisonment. They committed fraud in her prison term. I mean, it's just one fraud after the other, because that's how you know it's one of those things called the discovery doctrine of broken, which is a petition for broken chair as the resolution. Because whenever someone comes to a case where they've applied the discovery doctrine, which means we're the supreme authority in the presumption, and they're proven to basically be criminal instead. Okay. Sedant Armatoga, that's one of the principles of Sedant Armatoga, is when you apply things like a discovery doctrine, where you presume you're in supremacy. When you do that, if you are erred, you commit a greater tort than the person that you brought before you in judgment. And so that's the construct there. They brought a child and a mother under judgment. They judged the mother and they disattached the kid as an auxiliary criminal, and that's what they're doing at the border. And these children are not to be categorized as auxiliary criminals to be seized. They are not of their free will. They are not even of their free will to be under the jurisdiction of the United States. They don't willfully walk with consent here any more than my son willfully was a passenger in a car during an arrest. And that after that stoppage, which he was not party to any criminal activity within that he just disappears into the system, never to be seen again, and kidnapped and conveyed from his family. That is called human trafficking. That's what the Nazis did, folks. That's what fascists do. That's what Lenin did. These are things that people and systems of state that we consider to be utterly totalitarian do. And these people are doing it in robes and acting like it's okay. And it's not okay. It's openly criminal. It's criminal conspiracy against the most vulnerable people, our little ones, our innocent children. And I will not tolerate a government that thinks like that. I personally will not. And so I'm going to make sure, for my own personal need, I know that I would never raise arms against my government until they prove themselves to not be my government under the law. And that's what my vow is. And even then, the safety and security of the people are utmost. And so that's why I use the courts to correct the law, because that's what our founding fathers wished for and had hoped to create, is a government run by law, where instead of creating rebellions, we move the law and our government and the free will of the people by the course of the law. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well,
but I tell you, if
that would be the ideal,
that is the ideal, and that is the ideal thing that serves all children.
Yeah.
That serves all children.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to serve all children by making this to be a peaceful change in the way we think and do law, by fixing the vacancies that the corruptions have allowed to exist. So I'm walking through all the vacant lands that the attorneys left undone so that they could mine our children, literally, as chattel, and steal them and steal their estates and cloud their titles and live off of them and give their masters to live off our children, and to live in utter vassaldom and feudalism and tenancy of lands that we own. We're paying tenancy rights on lands that we own, folks. That's how bad it is. Okay, we're paying tenancy rights to occupy our own bodies. That's how bad it is. And I'm not going to tolerate that. So. If they don't prove themselves, though, I really have no problem crashing down, because it's better to have a disorganized world where children are safe to live and run and free, even in supposed chaos, than to be subjected to a system of state that eats on them like Moloch. So that's just my personal beliefs. But I'm going to prove it in the law. The word, the whip, and then the sword is my philosophy. And that's what Jesus tells me to do. The word, the whip, and the sword. I just put it in that analogy. First notice, second notice, third notice. So I'm noticing them. They've been noticed. Let's see what they do, folks. But it's going to be a fun Supreme Court season. And again, it's like dominoes. Every day I think we're
subscribe to the show. If it's free and you can get email updates of when we go live. It's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds.
And remember, I have told people that this whole Mexican cartel thing is going to ultimately show itself to be interconnected with JITFA and the Filipino situation down there, the Philippines and the Pacific Rims of China. You're going to find that the barriers to our nations are not just trade, folks. And if it is trade, it's because certain countries are trading things that we do not consider to be of a lawful nature, such as children. And they're doing that as a commodity, and they run their government on it. And we actually now, but the people are not knowing of this. There are places where the government knowingly does this. But yeah, this stuff in Mexico is going to prove to be a corridor that they were trying to cultivate to traffic children, other than through Canada. They were and the ports of California. They were just trying to create another corridor to traffic our children, drugs, and money. And again, when you say trafficking drugs, children are attached to that. Just remember that. If it's trafficking of drugs, you're talking children, and it's that. In fact, I think probably the trafficking of children is. I would think that it's more prevalent than we think. I would think that probably trafficking children is easier than trafficking arms, is what I would tell you. I would think so. In some parts of the world, because they just don't care. I mean, we're finding out that the governments don't really seem to care about the trafficking of children, including our own. So we already knew that.
Because it is our government that's perpetuating this.
Well, it's agents of it for sure. And again, and we make this clear every show. I hope everyone knows we make this clear. It's about people in places of government that are not following the law. Okay, I am in no way saying that my government is illegitimate in its structure. It is illegitimate in its function right now because you have criminals running. You have a lot of criminals running around breaking the law, willfully and wantonly within the government, and no one's putting them in prison or holding them to task. They're all running around protecting each other. They're all around affecting nepotism and unionism and all the things. That's when you get into fascism and totalitarianism and despotism, and that's why we are so every day, folks. And so when good things happen, like when Amelia talks about 3 people that just got convicted, woohoo, that's a good thing. That tells you things good. And we got coverage on, there's just a national, I just put this on my Facebook page. We just got, what's the report begins with an H? We just got national coverage on CPS as a conduit for child trafficking. What about the Americans? And it was on a national news, internet, Huffington report. Yeah,
that's
the Huff
amazing.
Report.
Huffington?
Oh, yeah, the Huff Report just picked up a story about it.
Oh, kudos to Huffington Post. And the daily callers, I think it's Daily.
Oh yeah, he's been hitting it good. He's been hitting it, but the Huff Report's
been doing a great job. I want to plug them, and Victor's Libertas too with Angie and Blake Meisner. If you know anything about Victor's Libertas, they're on YouTube and BitChute, and they're huge advocates for children and families that have been exposing hundreds of cases of CPS corruption in the system. You can subscribe to their show. They're on Patreon and they're on YouTube, as well as BitChute. And I'm going to be going on their show as a guest, so stay tuned for that as well.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you, it was a good lunch with Lotus on the holiday schedule, eh?
Yeah.
But I just think it's going to get fun, folks. I think that we're going to see a lot of things move quickly. I know that per the case demands, I really would say anybody that has PACER access, I would highly advise you all going and looking at those cases. Because
PACER is good, or justia.com is good too.
Right, but I'm saying for if you want to look up active case files and stuff. So, but because we're demanding that the Congress be ordered to amend Title IV to give direct oversight by the executive branch. I mean, this is a big deal, folks. I mean, if I can't get the courts to give our son back, we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, we really, as a nation, probably will be no more if there's not a course correction in the manner in which our judiciary is operating in coup. And I don't really care if they have some banking agenda. I could care less about their agenda. I don't care where they want the mouth of the the tail to hit the mouth. I don't care what attorneys want. I only care about the organic law of our nation and the divine natural law of our nation. And a Catholic is not a Christian, and especially a Catholic. And the central issue in that is that the Pope is not my vicar, and he's not my judge, and he doesn't get to tell me or my son or anybody where I go and whether I enter the kingdom of heaven. And I hold no one to be the judge of me in that respect except my goddess. So the Catholics believe otherwise, and they think that they can pay a tithe and be absolved from sin by the same man. And that's not how my precept belief system works. I don't think that people can be absolved from crimes against humanity by paying a tithe to a pope. I don't. Indulgences do not, I'm not a believer in indulgences, and I guess that would make me a Lutheran if I were to be of the Catholic persuasion. But you don't get to buy off or pay off sins against children, folks. You just don't. Not by our law. So let's leave it at that and pray for all the.
We have President Donald Trump, whose administration is focusing on absolutely ending the horrific practice of human trafficking. You can go to whitehouse.gov and you can look up human trafficking is an affront to human dignity. And millions are affected worldwide. Human trafficking is a global atrocity that deprives millions of their universal human rights. And it is an epidemic issue here in America, where I believe we have a human trafficking hub.
Oh my gosh, we statutized it. What do you mean? We created you. It's our baby. Anything related to international.
In 2017. FYI, in 2017, the Department of DHS, Department of Human Services, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, ICE, HSI initiated 833 human trafficking cases, resulting in 1,602 arrests and 578 convictions, and identified 518 victims of human trafficking. So we have ICE, the HHS, founded by the National Human Trafficking Hotline, received reports of 8,686 unique cases of potential trafficking in 2017 alone, identifying 21,644 potential victims. Annually elicits profits from human trafficking that are endless. I mean, billions and billions of dollars. So,
but here's the beauty of this case with Clay. Now it has been established by the statutes and the law that when they steal an American baby, let's put it that way, who is documented with a social security number and a birth certificate, that's a treasury crime and it's a federal crime of human trafficking.
They're grooming these kids. In fact, I posted an updated search, Google search. They are now claiming that 80% of human trafficking victims are from the Child Protective Services system.
Wow.
That is huge. That is huge. And I suspect that it's even higher than that. They objectify these kids from the moment they place them in foster care. You know, and they're
desire for money in any case, absolutely. So that tells you the purpose of that tells you their goal. Mm-hmm. Their goal is to create failing children and create failing families. See, that's not what. So okay, even the mandates of Social Security Act mandates that, and even and Title IV specifically tells you that the mandate of the Title IV E and D programs are to keep the family unit cohesively and together. They're supposed to go out of their way, folks, to prevent children from being removed. And children are never supposed to be removed when there's other options, such as family members that can take it, that are pre-qualified in 2 states, or family members that are willing to adopt. They're not following those rules because when they adopt a kid out to a family member, they lose the benefits. They lose the ability of moving the kid over to a state custody where they can flood the kid. And probably, I can tell you that they're also defrauding the Medicaid Medicare services. I already know they're defrauding Medicaid Medicare in the prison industry because you know what they do when you leave prison? This is how unregulated this stuff is, folks, by the executive branch of the state. They're allowing the states to basically defraud any number of state agency-based decision implemented, which means that any federal program that is under the implementation of the state executive branch or the state judiciary, whichever you do, are basically being able to defraud the federal government all the way up to the Supreme Court. Okay, that's what basically the Rucker-Feldman Doctrine is trying to expand. That you'd have to go to the Supreme Court to challenge any state agency-based decision. Okay, so that's at this point in time, that's your whole government because your government is all an agency of state. It's not the state. These are corporate charters and stuff. So anything related to anything would even need a challenge to the Supreme Court, which is what these crooked attorneys would love to do. So, I mean, you're talking about the defrauding of even Medicaid, Medicare, really, because I tell you what, you're in prison, right? You're about ready to get out, and they call you for a couple things. They call you to go get a picture ID, which you never want to do, but that's another story. And also to go fill out the paperwork that says that you're disabled because you've been in prison. I'm like, well, wait a minute. How do I qualify for Medicaid and Medicare when you made me work in prison? So if I was made to work in prison, how do I qualify as not satisfying work requirements and I'm incapable of working under the federal programs? So you understand what I'm saying? So the state, after it puts you in prison and forces you to do a job and mandates and says you must work, tries to get you to fill out declaratory statement so the state can declare you as incompetent and disabled under state benefits programs. So then they get federal funding for you being disabled after they just employed you. Okay, and literally that one of the requirements to qualify for disability is you haven't been employed. Okay, well, I was employed in prison. I got paid. It's that bad, folks. There are people that have jobs, full-time jobs, being forced to work 40 to 60 hours a week in the kitchen, cooking for other prisoners, and then they get out and the state promotes them filing for disability as unable to keep a job. What's that about? That's fraud. Mm-hmm. That's fraud. I mean, it's just rampant, folks. It's rampant. It's everywhere. It's not just in CPS. It's everywhere related to human trafficking, the prison industrial complex. It's so rampant. Babies are sold out of prisons for $3,000, folks, and it's unregulated. It's not even regulated by the states. It's regulated in the state of Ohio by the warden is the only person who has any knowledge or investment or control over who comes into these private prison and buy babies off pregnant prisoners for $3,000 on books. That woman just got put in jail for trying to sell her 7-year-old and 2 other children. So why is it that the state can promote the selling of babies out of prisons, folks? How is it the state can sell babies and put babies up for auction for women in prison for $3,000, but some poor, unfortunate woman who apparently feels like she needs to sell her children to get out of hock just got put in prison for selling her 7-year-old or attempting to sell her 7-year-old and her 3-month-old or whatever. I mean, so the state can do it out of prisons for women stuck in prison, dying, starving, needing money on books for $3,000, but I can't do it. You can't do it, Amelia. What if you tried to sell a baby for $3,000 on the internet? You get arrested tomorrow.
I've seen people do it on Craigslist to be.
And they get arrested, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They do. I've actually
facilitated in a prison.
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous. And sometimes they promote the adoption of children instead of the conveyance of children to family members waiting outside of prison. I've seen that happen. I've seen one where they denied a sister taking a baby. Oh, well, it has to go into foster care because you're out of state. Guess what? That was a federal law violation by a prison. And we don't even know if these babies that are born in prison are even documented. These women go to medical facility hospitals, still in the custody of the state, and give birth to these babies in state custody. Where is there a state agent verifying? You don't even know what goes on in these places. These are basically behind the scenes run by the prison, the Department of Corrections. Mm-hmm. Do you think everybody in Department of Corrections is straight-minded? No. Again, there are drug dealers all the time, people caught in prisons, violating the statutes, having relationships with prisoners. That's a big one. People get walked every day. Drug dealing in prisons, all that stuff. If it happens in the general pump, it happens in prison. It's just more expensive there. That's what I'm going to tell you. That's what I'm going to tell you. And the dealers are just different. Now they're the workers. It's just people have no idea of the corruptions that are going on in our society at the hands of these attorneys who think they're such gods that they're going to control our law, tell us all to behave. There's very few crimes. Leave people alone. Mm-hmm. Let crime be crime and let everybody just go away. That's what they need to do because they've criminalized everything. They've criminalized human nature. And yet they want to statutize. They want to statutize. We talk about criminalized human nature. It's not human nature, folks, for you to rape and mayhem your young, because then your tribe and your clan, your pride dies. Mm-hmm. Eat your young, die as a culture. That's why that's not a natural instinct. In nature, when animals try to rape, mayhem, and eat their young or children within the pride, they usually are ostracized and are killed by the rest of the adults. That's what happens in nature to people like pedophiles, just so you know. They don't tolerate them unless you're a bonobo, and that's just a freaky little tribe of monkeys there. They try to tell you that they say hi by having anal intercourse. I'm not sure what that's all about, but other than that sect of primates, which I'm pondering if, somehow we're connected to them, if that's the only animal group I've known that, I know dolphins rape in group, but that's not promoted by the pods. They're considered rogue, juvenile pods that do this. They're not considered mature. So these are not precepts that are even tolerated in nature. So pedophilia and raping and eating and bleeding and hunting children is not a natural instinct of rational people, civil people, mentally healthy people. These are psychopaths. Mm-hmm. So it's simply that. It's that simple. You have functional psychopaths operating in your government. That's what we have.
Well,
I think
I'm hopeful.
I'm very hopeful. I'm not just hopeful. I'm going to make damn sure something happens.
I know
because
you will.
My son's coming home.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what? The longer they better hope. Like I keep telling you, he's healthy, wealthy, and wise. Everyone pray. I think everyone should pray for every lost child. There are so many children lost out there.
There is. And we do pray every month. We pray on the Zeph Report. We have the Human 2020 campaign. You can go to human2020.com and you can check it out. And we also do a midnight prayer for the children and families in the Porthole to Justice on the 19th at midnight of every night, once a month. So yes, pray. And we also have a picture. We also have a mem for Clay in the Porthole to Justice. Yes. And you can go by and you can pray for Clay. Yeah.
He really is. He's a beautiful boy. And I tell you what, when it comes to prayer and these things, we pray for every child that's missing. Because I know that this is a divine process that we're in. I accept that wholeheartedly, that this is a divine process. And what I'm going to tell people is that the law that orders them to stop sacrificing the children in their temples has been put on the temples. Mm-hmm. And they're not to do it anymore by the law, and they've been told what the law says. If they continue to do it, there's that to be contended with, and there's prophecy for that. Mm-hmm. But the law that mandates them to stop sacrificing our children in their foreign temples has been firmly established and proven to be against our law in the Fourth Crown. That writ that is on the district court is a Fourth Crown claim petition in equity. That is the title. That is the subtitle of that petition, where we are mandating equity by our full faith and credit. They are living on our full faith. They are using our full faith, and our faith demands that our son Clay be returned, and that the people who were operated criminally against him in violation of our faith be brought to justice. And that's what we're demanding. And if they're not going to follow our faith, then they're not going to use our accounts anymore. They're not going to use our money. They're not that Treasury's not going to access our accounts. So if they don't want to listen to that, and they want to continue to subjugate us and to use our credit in our trusts, in our estates, in our Templar estates, as I've exposed to you, Amelia, they're not going to be our government anymore. And we're done. We're done. And so it's been affirmed, and the next, it's in their court to decide whether to abide by the law or not. I believe that they will. The law walks itself, as I've told you, Amelia. It doesn't really matter what the evil people do. The law walks itself because there's always a righteous person. That's the beauty of it. It walks itself because there's always righteous people standing around to do it. So namaste to everybody.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and tell Ray I said hello.
I will, absolutely. She's very optimistic. We work very hard at this. This is very. It takes a great deal from us, but we do it for Clay, and we do what we must. Just a chin up, head down. That's what I say. Yeah. Chin up, head down. We get it done. We'll get it done, and we're going to save all the kids. So, namaste. Everybody enjoy the rest of their holiday. I'm sure I'll still talk to you on Saturday. And it's the first time, it's the best, it's the worst of times, it's the best of times, folks. These are times that we will remember our entire lives. These are things that we will look down upon and in hindsight go, I can't believe we ever did it any other way. So it is what it is. It shall be as it shall be. So namaste to everybody. These are good things that we bring to you. Good news. So watch for more good things to come.
Yay. All right, Lotus. This has been another episode of Off the Cuff, Porthole to Justice, with Lotus Justice, myself. And you can subscribe to my show for free on Spreaker.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm live on Facebook, my blog, and you can also subscribe to Social Media News Network, where you can socialize personally with a lot of the hosts and bloggers and investigative journalists. And you can comment and check out their shows. Oh, also check out Faith Mix. Faith Mix is on Spreaker now and is in Social Media News Network, which is Govinda's show, the founder of Human 20 on 20. So check that out too and subscribe on Spreaker. All right, guys. Have a great day.
die.